So coming up this weekend is going to be a pretty decent Apex card, and honestly a card that I am looking forward to. I think it is one of the better Apex cards that we have had recently, and it is a little bit of a late upload for me. I do typically try and get these out on Sunday night, but recently, to try and stay on top of the Contender Series, I've been delaying them a couple of days, and it's actually Wednesday at the time of me recording this video, but kind of luckily that I did actually delay a little bit because we do have a new fight between Junior Tafa and Sharaf just recently announced to be on the card, with Chris Barnett pulling out of the fight. It should be a pretty good card. I'm looking forward to it, and of course Jacob and Angelo do have quite a bit of bets on this card on the WeWantPicks.com at $10 per month membership if that is something that you are looking for, and it is $10 per month, but you get a 3-day free trial if you sign up using my code ARTEM, and there I will have an article coming out this week, ideally, maybe on Saturday for me, Friday night for people in the US, on the Contender Series Week 10, so you can get some early predictions out before the odds even drop. And that's kind of all. Let's now get into my predictions for the card. I'm going to try and get them a little bit faster because I do notice that my UFC videos are pretty long. I don't mind my Contender Series videos being pretty long because there is a lot to talk about. A lot of people don't really recognize the fighters, so I have to talk about quite a bit. But I noticed that I do kind of just talk a little bit too much on these cards. Let's hope that I can speed it up a little bit in some way. Clayton Carpenter fights against Lucas Rocha. This is the Tapology order, so maybe not finalized. This is Clayton Carpenter's return. He has taken quite a bit of time away recently. I know he made his debut against Juan Camilo Ronderos about 1 year and 7 months ago, and he looked good. And that one, he got the submission early, but then I think he got injured and he took a lot of time off. But I do think that in this matchup against Lucas Rocha, it probably does favor him in some ways. I do think that he does have better wrestling and grappling than Lucas Rocha, who really is at the base of it, just a very scrappy striker. And if you do look into his career, he's got a lot going on outside of MMA. Unfortunately, it looks like Tapology's removed that part from his profile, but he has a massive background in Golden Gloves amateur boxing. I believe he's also a champion in grappling, BJJ, and other things like that before becoming a professional MMA fighter, and you can see the well-roundedness in his game. He beat on the Contender Series Edgar Chairez, who did fight him on short notice, and that is a win that has aged quite well. And in that one as well, he was actually able to look to get the takedowns and the control quite regularly against a guy who has proven to be somewhat difficult to control on the ground. Lucas Rocha is going to be making his debut in the UFC after being on the Contender Series last year. Little bit of a somewhat controversial situation. He missed weight by so much the first time around against Bittencourt, weighing at 131 pounds. And then they just rescheduled the fight again to be at, I believe this was at bantamweight. Very unfair, I think, for Bittencourt. Rocha did end up going out there and getting the win, but if you do go out there and you do watch his fights, he is a very scrappy striker. He has actually fought some decent guys on paper, but not the best competition overall, I feel, and he has been taken down and controlled before. That's how I think Clayton Carpenter can and will win this matchup, so I am going to predict Clayton Carpenter to win this fight by submission. He's going to be a bit bigger in there as well, and he's not even the biggest flyweight, it's just that Rocha is pretty short. I do know that this is a very similar matchup to the Bittencourt fight, but I think that Carpenter is going to be a little bit more effective in that wrestling, so I'm going to go with Carpenter here, and I think he can get a submission over Rocha. Now we have another debut, Cody Haddon making his debut after having a very impressive performance on the Contender Series just this year, just a few weeks ago now, against Billy Brand. And that was against the guy that did give Peyton Talbot some problems in one of Peyton Talbot's earlier fights. But Billy Brand was a Muay Thai striker, and I was very impressed with how well Cody Haddon looked on the feet against Billy Brand. And then, of course, he did end up getting the submission, but he looked so smooth and so clean in the striking. But now he takes on not a striker, but a pretty dominant wrestler in Dan Argueta. Now, Dan Argueta's had a very odd run of things recently. He did win against Nick Argueta, who is an okay wrestler, not great, but he's okay. He fought him on short notice. 2 no contests in a row. That bad stoppage against Ronnie Lawrence, which actually went in his favor. And then the no contest to Miles Johns, because I believe Miles Johns failed for something he shouldn't have been taken, but it wasn't too serious. I don't think this suspension was that long. And Gene Matsumoto was just Gene Matsumoto. Now, I do think that Cody Haddon can find success in this matchup. I do worry about a couple of things, though. I think that Cody Haddon is a small bantamweight, but I have talked to a couple of people there's absolutely no chance he makes 125 pounds. So maybe I do need to reserve my judgment until I see him just fight against more UFC bantamweights to kind of how makes sense. I think that Cody Haddon is the better striker in this fight. I don't think it's necessarily close. I think he's way faster than Dan Argueta, but I do think it would be fair to say that Dan Argueta is probably the best wrestler he's ever fought. So it's going to be interesting to see how good his takedown defense is going to be, how his scrambles are going to be, because he's going to need to do that in the ground in a matchup like this. But I do like the striking of Haddon enough. I do think that the odds are a little bit wide. It's not a good matchup for Cody, I will be honest. And he is getting thrown in there against a pretty tough guy. But I think if he can beat Dan Argueta, Cody Haddon is going to be 10 out of 10. A guy to keep your eye on. I do think that Cody Haddon can win this one though. I don't think he can submit Dan, but I think there's a good chance he might be able to land a big shot and find a knockout later on into the fight's second or third round. The new fight now, Junior Tafa fighting against Sean Sharaf. I will be fully transparent with you guys. I did try and find tape on Sean Sharaf, and I couldn't find a lot. Now, I think that there is a lot more easier ways to find it because this Fight Club OC event took place on Triller. For some reason, I'm literally locked out of Triller. I used the 30-day membership for the Contender Series and then created another account to use another 30-day membership to try and watch more fights on Triller. And they didn't like that at all. And now I can't create an account to even pay for Triller to watch fights on Triller. So I couldn't watch this fight against Chadwick Kindle. I could find this fight against Nathan Mullet on YouTube, which is pretty easy to find, but it only lasted 9 seconds. And I could only find highlights and photos of the LJ Torres fight. So I will be honest with you guys, I haven't found that much about Sean Sharaf, but in the very small moments that I have found, it's gonna be a fun fight because Sean Sharaf closes the distance. It doesn't necessarily look like he has the best defense, and neither really does Junior Tafa, and he likes to throw bombs. The way that he knocked out LJ Torres was with a massive overhand right, which just put him out pretty much. And then against Nathan Mullet, they just got scrappy in the middle, and he landed first, put out Nathan Mullet in 9 seconds. He does take on Junior Tafa, who I will be honest with you guys, hasn't found as much success in the UFC as I hoped and thought he would. Because if you actually look into him, he is a former Glory kickboxer, and he isn't just any former Glory kickboxer. No, he wasn't a champion, but he was in the top 10 of Glory in the heavyweight division. But watching those Glory fights, he didn't really throw kicks. He really did just box and throw bombs, which is kind of awesome. That he did lose a couple of fights because of that. Of course, Glory kickboxing background, a tougher brother, a tougher gang, of course, but he wants to brawl. He wants to stand and brawl, and I think he's got that kind of matchup here against Sharaf. I haven't seen Sharaf wrestle. In all honesty, I do just think that these guys are going to go out there, stand in the middle of the octagon, and throw bombs. And the pick that I'm going to go with is actually Junior Tafa, just because I think that he is going to be a bit faster. He does have Glory kickboxing experience. I know that he hasn't looked great in the UFC so far, but he lost to Usman, who took him down. He lost to Marcos Rogério de Lima, which is a fight he took on like 2 days' notice, and that was on the feet, so not a good look, but is what it is. I think that this is going to be a brawl. I think both guys are going to try and slug it out, just kind of what I've seen from Sean Sharaf, and I do think that Junior Tafa can get the better of those exchanges. But I will say this, if Junior Tafa doesn't win this fight, especially because it's a short notice fight for Sharaf, I think that we might just have to see him fight a couple of times in Australia before he comes back, which would be really sad. I do think Tafa does win, though. I genuinely do think that is the case. Now, Niko Price fights against Themba Gorimbo. Price surprised me when he beat Alex Morono. I thought Morono was going to beat him because Price got knocked out by Robbie Lawler in his retirement fight in like less than a minute, I think it was, and then lost to Phil Rowe. But Phil Rowe's kind of like a borderline top 15, top 25 guy, I would say. And I will be honest with you guys, Themba Gorimbo at first I was not very high on him. I still don't think that his striking is amazing. It is pretty sloppy. He's very aggressive. He doesn't really have the best defense, but on offense, he can really let those hands go and he can land. Now, he is more so of a wrestler-grappler sort of fighter, even though he was out-wrestled and out-grappled by AJ Fletcher. But since then, I would say that he has had quite a bit of very favourable matchups since then. He did fight against Takashi Sato, well-known fighter for just absolutely zero grappling whatsoever. Pete Rodriguez is he's Pete Rodriguez, who knocked him out, actually, which was quite good. And then Ramiz Brahimar, who come back after quite a bit of a layoff due to injuries and just looked terrible, didn't he, really? But This is probably the toughest fight that Gorimbo's had to take since losing to Fletcher, for sure. But I still don't trust Niko Price. I mean, Alex Morono is a guy that's just on and off. Niko Price managed to beat him, which is just amazing to me. Price is just a crazy guy. I think he is going to be the better striker here, even though he does have a lot of grappling. But I think that Themba Gorimbo is just going to be the guy that's going to go out there and get the takedowns. I think he can control Niko Price on the ground. But I think that Price could potentially be a really good underdog. I'm going to pick Gorimbo. I'm going to pick Gorimbo by decision. I'm still not totally sold on him as like a fighter, as a prospect. But I do think he can get this one done against Niko Price. Now, Jonathan Pearce fights against Pat Sabatini. I do like Pearce in this fight, even though I really was trying to find reasons to pick Pat Sabatini. But I think that Pearce can still go out there and get it. I think maybe once again, you could have another really good underdog in Pat Sabatini, and I could see him maybe pulling it off as an underdog. But just recently, the performances of Pat Sabatini, besides the Lucas Almeida fight, haven't really been amazing to me. I mean, this is the same guy that made Damon Jackson think that he's a boxer, and that is the worst thing that happened to Damon Jackson's career, because he got knocked out and outboxed like multiple times after that win, and then he lost to Diego Lopez. But that's Diego Lopez. We know that he's a bit of a savage, and he just beat Brian Ortega, which is amazing. Jonathan Pearce, on the other hand, though, somewhat mirror matchup. Both guys are wrestlers. And in this one, I just think that Jonathan Pearce, being the significantly bigger guy for the weight class, is actually going to be able to go out there and take down Pat Sabatini. Now, Pat Sabatini has been very well known for a long time now for really good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for really good grappling and wrestling. But in this matchup, Jonathan Pearce, you know, I'm not going to ignore the fact that prior to getting subbed by Joe Anderson Brito, he was taking Joe Anderson Brito down, and he was controlling him. Now, David Onama did give him a lot more problems than I expected him to, I'll be honest with you. But Brito has incorporated a lot of grappling in his game recently, and Pearce was out wrestling him, out grappling him, controlling him on the ground. And although Pat Sabatini, I would say in pure grappling, is a better grappler than Brito, I think that it's still a somewhat stylistic matchup, but Pat Sabatini doesn't present like a knockout threat on the feet. And I think that Pearce can go out there and win this one. I am still somewhat surprised that he is the favorite here. I thought that the odds would be a bit closer, and I thought that maybe the fans would have bet on Sabatini, but I feel like a lot of people, including myself, are quite low on Sabatini. I'm not that high on Pearce anymore. I was very high on him at some point just because he is a massive guy for the weight class, but the fight against Darren Elkins wasn't a very good look. I thought the cardio didn't look great then, but I'm still going to go with Pearce. I'm going to pick Pearce to win by decision here. I think he can control on top. His style is very ground and pound orientated, so if anyone's going to be doing the damage, even though damage apparently just means absolutely nothing in today's scoring criteria, it's going to be Pearce because he's a ground and pound kind of fighter. So that's why I'm picking him. Now we have Sergio Vergara fighting against Ramazan Timurov. This is more a Sergio Vergara fade than anything. I will be honest with you guys. Ramazan Timurov wasn't as good as I thought he was going to be. This guy is small for 125, and Vergara might be the bigger guy in the matchup. I know he's listed at 1 inch taller, but Timurov's not a big guy. Every single fight that I was able to see of Ramazan Timurov, he was a smaller guy in the fight. He's a striker, for sure. I mean, he's got most of his wins come by KO. He wants to keep the fight on the feet, and he does have very good takedown defense. He has fought quite a few times for Makhmud Muradov's promotion, and I was very disappointed to know that UFC Fight Pass added Muradov Professional League after this Timurov one, so you have to kind of go through YouTube and try and find them. But one way to try and find his fights is not to search up Ramazan Timurov. I found a lot of fights under Ramazan Bek Timurov, but nonetheless, he's a striker, a former Ryzen fighter as well, beaten a couple of decent guys in Ryzen, first round knockouts though. The way that Timurov really does fight is he just wants to land left hooks. Like, he will jump into left hooks. I've seen this guy literally 2 feet off the ground throwing left hooks, but he is a pretty solid boxer. He does have decent leg kicks as well, but I would say one of his best assets is the takedown defense, and I do think that in a matchup against Sergio Vergara, he is going to be the better striker in the fight. I think that Sergio Vergara would probably be the one looking to get the takedowns in this matchup, but I don't think that he can get them, just because I have seen Timurov defend so many takedowns on the regional scene, fighting for Makhmud Muradov's promotion in Uzbekistan. Now, Sergio Vergara, we all know Sergio Vergara, I guess, at this point. has lasted in the UFC a lot longer than I thought he was going to. Again, he's another one of those guys who I didn't think looked amazing off the Contender Series, and he's just still doing it, man. He's beaten a couple of good guys as well. Did recently lose to Asu Amabayev. Not a similar stylistic matchup, even though they both are from, I believe Asu Amabayev, no, he's from Kazakhstan, isn't he? Not Uzbek, but he beat Vinicius Salvador. Terrible. He beat terrible, and he looks bad in that fight. He got caught by Daniel Lacerda. If you're getting caught by Lacerda, you're probably getting caught by Temirov. Sergio Vergara is a big guy. He can wrestle. He will wrestle in this fight, but I do think that Temirov is good enough to keep the fight on the feet and has much better takedown defense than Clayton Rodriguez does, which is the guy that he beat in, I believe, his debut himself. I'm going with Temirov. I'm not too sure if he does get the knockout, but I think he is the better striker, and I think he's going to be the one that keeps the fight on the feet. Now we have Chidi Njokuani fighting against Jared Gooden. I do like Chidi Njokuani in this fight because I think he's the more technical striker. Now I'm happy that Jared Gooden was able to find his way back into the UFC because he fought a couple of good guys to get there. On short notice, he took on Carlston Harris, but before that, he fought against DeMarcus Jackson and Doug Usher, who was a little bit older at that point, and he lost to Imba Kasanganai, who's now a champion for the PFL at 205 pounds. Chidi Njokuani, of course, former middleweight. I wasn't too sure if I loved his move down to 170 because I think his track record at 170 prior to his fight against Rhys McKee was pretty poor, but he looked decent against Rhys McKee. Now, Rhys McKee, just unfortunately, just seems to be a guy that just can't buy a win in the promotion, but Njokuani was able to look pretty good on the feet. It was close, but McKee did slow down a lot towards the end of that fight. I like Njokuani in this fight, as I said, because I think he's the more technical striker, and I would be somewhat surprised if we saw Jared Gooden come out there with a very heavy wrestling game plan. I mean, it definitely could happen, but watching Jared Gooden's fights, he is pretty scrappy, but I do really I noticed a lot against Carlston Harris, that he wasn't really, like, the most technical striker. You know, both of those guys, including Carlston, did not look that great on the feet, and I think if anyone's going to be faster with a very fast, like quite nice technical Muay Thai style, it's going to be Chidi Njokuani. I think he can go out there, and I think he can land the better shots against Jared Gooden. Gooden's a tough guy. I could see Njokuani getting the finish just because he does hit hard, but I'm going to pick him to win by decision in this fight. And now we have Josh Fremd fighting against Abdul Razak Alhassan. I like Abdul Razak Alhassan in this fight, and I actually think that he is probably going to go out there and find a first-round knockout. Now, Abdul Razak Alhassan is just a guy you can never really trust. He just sometimes wins and he sometimes loses. I don't really know how to describe it, but he's a very, very powerful guy. We've seen that so many times in his career so far. Most of his wins have come by knockout in the first round. They've all come by knockout in the first round. I thought he won a decision recently, but obviously he did not. He did, of course, fight against Cody Brundage. Hurt him. Accidental elbows to the back of the head is what it is. Razak lost his potential win there. But he has given some pretty decent fighters problems in the past. Now, Abdul Razak Alhassan, he's not really the most technical striker in the world, but he just hits hard, and he hits really hard. He does have a judo background. His name is Judo Thunder, and I know that it's a pretty big part of his training because Abdul Razak Alhassan is pretty well known around Fortis MMA for being a guy that actually will stay behind training sessions and help people out with their judo if they want help with their judo. And we just don't really see that much in the UFC because when he wins, it's in the first round, and when he loses, it's typically out of the first round. I think he's better than Fremd. Fremd we just saw get out-wrestled by Petrosky, so I think that if Abdul Razak Alhassan wants to go to that wrestling, I think he actually could take Fremd down. And on the feet, I do think he is the much more powerful guy. I know that Fremd is a very tall guy for the weight class, but he does not move his head at all, and I think that Razak Alhassan is just going to land on him and knock him out in the first round. So I'm going to pick Alhassan by first round KO. Somewhat confident in it as well, to be honest with you. And now we have Daniel Rodriguez fighting against Alex Morono. Alex Morono sometimes shows up, sometimes doesn't show up, and I just can't trust him anymore. He lost to Niko Price in 2024. Yeah, that's kind of it for Alex Morono. I like Morono, I'll be honest with you, just because he is the guy that you can rely on every single time to accept a short notice fight. I think most of his recent fights have been on short notice. He fought against Santiago Ponzinibbio, and before getting knocked out pretty brutally, was looking good against Ponzinibbio on the feet. And that was a short notice fight, which he accepted. He fought, of course, against Donald Cerrone a few years ago now on short notice. I believe the Buckley fight was short notice as well. He just takes on a lot of guys on short notice. But I think in this fight, another thing about Alex Morono is he has really, really good grappling, and that is what a lot of people know him for. And he doesn't grapple at all anymore. I don't understand why he doesn't do it. And if he's not going to grapple, I think against Daniel Rodriguez, who is definitely getting up there in age now and did take a bit of time off. Only a year off from the Ngari fight, still a little bit of time considering it was him. I don't think that Daniel Rodriguez is going to have to deal with a wrestling threat as much against Alex Morono as he has in some of his recent losses. So I think that Daniel Rodriguez can go out there. I think he can outstrike Morono. I think he is going to be the better striker, the better boxer for sure in this matchup, even though Morono is pretty good on the feet. I like Daniel Rodriguez. I'm going to pick him to win by decision in this fight, and I think he gets it done by keeping the fight on the feet and landing the better shots. Cory McKenna fights against Julia Polastri. Have I picked an underdog yet on the card? I haven't really been paying attention to the odds. I don't think I have, and I'm not going to do it. I think Polastri wins. I know she did just lose to Josephine Knudsen, but Knudsen's a good fighter, even though she just is really, really boring and frustrating to watch. I think Polastri can win this one here. She is a pretty good fighter from the Contender Series, and also prior to that, she was a champion of the LFA. I had to triple check that one, but yes, she's a good grappler from the LFA. I knew she fought for the LFA. I wasn't 100% sure if she was the champion though. And I think that in this fight against McKenna, I think she's going to be the better striker. Cory McKenna took a little bit of time off after beating Cheyenne Velismas, who I believe hasn't fought since then, if I'm not mistaken. Lost to Jacqueline Amarin by first round submission. Was it first round submission? Artem Bekatov got me acting up, guys. It was in the first round. Jeez. Artem's win, man. It's got me too excited. I do think that Polastri can win this one. McKenna is a wrestler who really likes to control opponents in top control positions. I do think that Polastri will be the more scrappy fighter on the feet. I think that she actually will probably be the better striker, and I think that she will land harder. Damage trumps all, except the women's MMA, I know that, so maybe McKenna just wins a decision. I'm going with Polastri. Let's move on. I'm sorry, guys, that fight breakdown was a total mess. Let's move on. Grant Dawson fighting against Rafa Garcia. Somewhat of a mirror matchup. Now, Grant Dawson's really getting a little bit of a treatment, in my opinion, to get him back on a little bit of a momentum after that really bad loss to Bobby Green. Got knocked out very quickly with what looked like a jab, but like Bobby Green was kind of changing stances in the middle of it. In a main event as well, they gave him Joe Salecki, big step down in competition, even though Salecki is a dangerous grappler. And now they're giving him Rafa Garcia, who has taken a lot of time away from the sport. And his last win, if my mouse is not going to start working, I believe it was against Mahashati? No, he fought Clay Guida, but he fought Mahashati before then. Rafa Garcia is a boxer wrestler. That is his style. He boxes and he wrestles. But in this fight, I think that Grant Dawson's going to be the better wrestler. Now, I don't think at this weight class, Grant Dawson's going to be a better striker than literally anyone. But he will be the better wrestler in the fight against Rafa Garcia, and I think he's going to have a little bit of a size advantage as well. Rafa Garcia also spending a lot of time away. I think that it's going to probably benefit Grant Dawson, who has come back like somewhat quickly after his loss to Bobby Green, trying to bounce back. I like that. I like the wrestling of Dawson. I like the grappling of Dawson. The cardio of Dawson is always going to be a concern. But I think that against Garcia, I think he can get the top control and win a decision, even though he isn't really the most exciting guy. And now we have Brad Tavares fighting against Junior Park. I have an underdog on the card. Okay, I thought I was going all favorites for a second, because I am going to pick Brad Tavares to win this matchup against the Iron Turtle. Now, I love the Iron Turtle. I think everyone loves the Iron Turtle. But I don't think he can take down Brad Tavares. Brad Tavares recently, to be fair, has had some pretty bad performances. He did lose to Gregory Rodriguez. It's just a bad loss. Getting knocked out. He got knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez after having a good chin as well. And he got knocked out by Bruno Silva. And he lost to Drake, but it's fine though. I think that Junior Park can't take down Brad Tavares. That's kind of really where I think I see the fight happening. I think that Park is too stationary on the feet. I know that he's looked really good prior to his recent loss, but before that he was on a very good win streak against my GOAT, Dennis Tiulin, and then the loss to Andre Muniz is what it is. I think that Tavares can keep the fight on the feet. I think he's the better boxer. I think he's a better striker, and I think he can push the fight more so in the second and the third rounds if the fight gets there, which I think it will. I think this fight goes off 3 rounds, and I think the better striker, despite being nearly 37 years old, is Brad Tavares. I think he can land more on the Iron Turtle. I just don't think that Iron Turtle is going to get the takedowns in this fight. And I think that Tavares can win it in that way. 19% picking Tavares. I am on an island. But now we move up to the main event. I really wanted to pick Brandon Royval. I really did, because I still have a little bit of lack of faith in Tatsuro Taira. I will be honest with you guys, I did pick Alex Perez to beat Tatsuro Taira, and the reason was just because I was kind of just basing it on the fact that I had seen Tatsuro Taira struggle in the striking in quite a few matchups. You've got to admit he did struggle somewhat with the Edgar Chairez fight. Again, he just beat up Carlos, that's fine. But like, he's still like, he was dominating guys. But this is a guy that went from fighting Carlos Hernandez to fighting Alex Perez, who was coming off quite a pretty good run. You know, he had just knocked out Matheus Nicolau, and he just fought a couple of times before that as well, just after coming back after like 3 years away. And Taira looked good in that fight. He didn't look really too lost on the feet. I thought he looked pretty good on the feet. And then, of course, he did hurt Perez with that awkward takedown attempt when he was on his back. I think in this fight against Brandon Royval, if Royval chooses to strike against Tatsuro Taira, he will win. But I think if the fight gets into any sort of grappling exchanges at all, because Brandon Royval is just so aggressive in everything he does, Brandon Royval is going to have opportunities. Brandon Royval is going to be able to... sorry, not Brandon Royval. Tatsuro Taira is going to have opportunities because Brandon Royval is so aggressive. Royval will go for a submission that may not be there. He will try and reverse a position in an awkward way. And I think that Tatsuro Taira can actually capitalize on that part of the grappling just because of what we have seen so far. Taira is just a level above some of these guys in the grappling. And I think that there's a title shot on the line, even for Royval. I think if you're Brandon Royval, despite losing to Pantoja recently, you just beat Brandon Moreno. I thought that Royval beat Brandon Moreno in that fight as well. I think if you beat the 16-0 Tatsuro Taira, you have to just get a title shot, even though the title shot is very likely going to Kai Asakura. I think you're the next guy in line for sure. And that's kind of where I see the fight. But I think if the fight is on the feet, I still don't love Tatsuro Taira striking. I don't think that at 125 pounds, where everyone is so fast, every single person is so fast at this weight class, he has the defense, I guess, required to kind of keep up with some of these guys that hit pretty hard at Royval, like Royval. And you look at Royval, this guy's huge for the weight class. I think he's going to be a lot bigger than Tatsuro Taira in the fight for sure. He's very tall. He uses his range pretty well. He's got a pretty nasty jab. When you get close, he shoots a lot of knees, throws a lot of knees, sorry. And I think that maybe Tatsuro Taira could potentially hurt himself a little bit by putting himself in a position where Royval can land one of these knees, because Matheus Nicolau unfortunately learned that you cannot leave yourself exposed in that way. But I do think that if the fight gets into the grappling, I think he can actually control Brandon Royval. And I also think that Royval, just because he's so aggressive with everything that he does, he's going to leave himself open a little bit. And that's why I like Taira in the matchup to win by submission. But Taira being minus 200 against Brandon Royval is insane to me. Like, I don't understand where the confidence is coming for a lot of these guys. Minus 200 against the guy that just beat Brandon Moreno. And people thought that Brandon Moreno was like the GOAT. And Royval just beat him. And now he's fighting a guy, and he's a pretty big underdog. I don't really get the odds. I do think Taira wins. I do think he wins by submission. Seems like most people agree. But like, this is crazy odds, is it not? That's nuts. I do like Taira to win the matchup, though. I think he does get it done by sub. Let me know what you think in the comments below. 28-minute video for a 12-13 fight card. In the past, it would have been like 45. So I think I did a pretty good job of making it pretty quick. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.